Scan Pro Video bring you a series of webinars focusing on the latest Blackmagic design products and information. This session is hosted by Scan Pro Video's Alistair Davidson, who will be talking you through the all-new DaVinci Resolve 17 Studio and why you should be taking the step over to Blackmagic's industry-recognised NLE.
So thanks for joining us on this webinar, where we're just going to take a look at why you might want to upgrade from the free version to the studio version of DaVinci Resolve. The free version is obviously DaVinci Resolve, and the paid for version is DaVinci Resolve Studio. And just a few things before we kick off, a little bit of housekeeping. We'd ask that everyone stays muted for the duration of the webinar, just so we can get through this and present without having to do a lot of stop-start. I know it's a Tuesday afternoon. We don't really want to take up too much of your time. We just want to get through this and just sort of show you some features. There is going to be a Q&A session at the end, so feel free to throw any questions you might have in the chat window. I've got it up here. I'll be monitoring it, and I have a colleague or two in the chat as well who should be able to give me a nudge just in case I'm missing anything in specific. But apart from that, let's sort of dive in and take a look at this. My name's Alistair Davidson. I do some work for the Pro Video team at Scan. I'm also a freelance filmmaker, editor, and colorist, and I'm a certified DaVinci Resolve trainer as well. So I've spent quite a bit of time with DaVinci Resolve. And it's my go-to application for pretty much everything these days, whether it's editing, VFX, color. It's just incredibly powerful in what it can do. And we're going to take a look at why you might want to go from the free version to the studio version. So I'll just share my screen here. Let me get this up. So everyone should be able to see this PowerPoint here. Now, I've got a couple of slides I'm going to go through. I don't want to give you the sort of death by PowerPoint treatment over a Zoom call on a Tuesday afternoon. It's not exactly how you want to spend your time. So I've just got maybe sort of 10 or so slides that we're going to run through, and then we'll actually dive into the software itself. So before we sort of start looking at specific features, it's worth noting that Blackmagic Design have a document on their website called the Feature Comparison Guide, and it gives you a breakdown table like this, where it shows DaVinci Resolve, which is the free version, and DaVinci Resolve Studio, which is the paid-for licensed version, and it'll tell you what features are in, if they're in either version. Now, I think the latest version they have, that shows a picture for 15, and there might be one for 16 as well, but there isn't one for 17, which is the most recent version. I suspect that'll probably be coming in the future. 17 is a relatively new release, but it's just worth knowing. Most of the features tend to stay the same. There's only been one or two features that have changed in terms of being available in both versions in the recent sort of releases. So it's always worth knowing. If you're not sure if it's there, if I'm not going to cover it, then always check the feature comparison guide. So the first thing I want to talk about, Scan being a computer hardware store, this is one that's quite close to us, is multi-GPU support. So the free version of DaVinci Resolve supports two GPUs for different purposes. As you see here, we've got DaVinci Resolve. We can have a display GPU, and the display GPU is what runs our monitors. It does nothing other than give us a screen on any of our display monitors. And then we can also use an additional processing graphics card if we want, to do things like noise reduction and all the image processing that DaVinci Resolve does. Now, you can do it off a single graphics card if you want. If you've got a couple £1,000 burning a hole in your pocket, you can go and buy one of the big fancy RTX A6000 48GB graphics cards and do that to drive both your displays and image processing. But for most of us, that's just not possible. So sometimes it's easier just to buy a cheaper graphics card that's just going to run the displays, which takes any sort of load off it, and you can just throw that all on the processing GPU. And that works really well. But when you get into the studio version of Resolve and you start working on, bigger projects, you might be applying more effects, you might be doing noise reduction, you might be doing a lot more of these types of things, then you might find that having one graphics card, one image processing graphics card, isn't quite doing it for you. You're not getting real-time playback. It's not as smooth as you want. Well, this is where the studio version of Resolve supports multiple image processing GPUs. And this is dependent on the operating system you're working on. So generally, we go when we're working with Linux, we'll do sort of, you can have up to, it's like eight image processing graphics cards. On Windows, it's like 4 image processing graphics cards, and I think on Mac it's 3 or 4 as well. So you can really build out powerful systems and just keep upgrading them as time goes on, depending on your needs. So that's the multi-GPU support part of it. There's also support for 10-bit codecs in the studio version of Resolve. So with the rise of DSLRs and DSLMs, mirrorless cameras, for running or for sort of run and gun, or entry-level short filmmaking, all these sorts of things for YouTube as well, they tend to record in more compressed formats like H.264 and H.265. And recently they've started doing 10-bit recording as well. And a lot of people might try and import these files into the free version of Resolve, and what they'll see is what we are seeing on this screenshot, which is just a black image. And that's simply because the free version doesn't support these 10-bit codecs. You need the studio version to open those files. But once you open, once you're using the studio version, you can import and work on them like any other file. This is a slide that's actually a bit of a hangover from Resolve 16, because this has changed in 17. In 16, collaborative workflows were only available in the studio version. Blackmagic have changed that now, so that in 17, you can use the collaborative workflow with the studio version and the free version. And you might be asking, well, I thought this was why we upgrade. Why are you telling us what's now in the free version? And I'll get back to that in a minute or two. But overall, the collaborative workflow basically means that you can have an editor, an assistant editor, a colorist, a sound editor, all working on the same project at the same time. And previously that was only the studio version, like we said, but it's now in the free version. And I'll get back to that in a sec. When it comes to HDR is a bit of a buzzword at the moment. Everyone's talking about, doing HDR grades, or, delivering in HDR, is my TV HDR, is at the right neat level, all these sorts of things. And generally, when we're looking at that from a mastering side, when we're actually doing the grade on it, this is what we consider to be a studio feature. So it's not like you can't do any HDR work at all in Resolve in the free version. But what you can't do is these parts that are going to be grayed out, and I'll go through them a little bit. Don't want to go all the way back. So what you can do in the free version is you can set up the color management part of Resolve. So you can set up Resolve to say, my input files are Rec 709 and I want them to go out at Rec 2020 at 1000 nits, as an example. You can do the sort of basic color management part of it. You can also monitor HDR over an SDI output if you have a DeckLink card. If you've got a video I/O card, you can, if you've got an an SDI output, you can view HDR from that. What you can't do are these grayed out sections here. So HDR scopes, being actually able to see the full range of your image in a 0 to 10,000 nit scope. HDR nodes, so specific nodes for processing HDR files that work in an HDR space, and Dolby Vision and HDR10 plus analysis. And what that does, that analysis, depending on whether you're delivering Dolby Vision or HDR10 plus, actually analyzes all your frames and delivers the dynamic metadata to go with that. Now, if you're not, if you're making YouTube videos or short films, you might not be, that worried about the HDR tools. But it's always worth knowing that this is what you get when you upgrade. You also have the ability to output HDR over HDMI outputs, and you get IMF deliveries. And that's the big one, because that IMF delivery is what Netflix looks for. So if you are delivering to Netflix, they'll pretty much only accept an IMF delivery these days. Resolution wise, the free version of Resolve does quite a lot. It goes all the way up to Ultra HD, so 2160 by 3840 or 3840 by 2160. That Ultra HD 4K broadcast resolution as we know it. If you're going to be doing, again, theatrical deliveries, say DCI 4K, or if you're delivering to big, LED walls or anything like that, and you're doing it in 8K, they're studio only features. So you can work, in UHD the whole way through in the free version, but as soon as you need to go above that, if you're delivering higher than that, or you want to work higher than that, then you're going to need the studio version. Now, this is where I sort of look back around to where I was talking about the collaborative workflows. So the collaborative workflows, great, you can use them on the free and the studio version. One thing that you can't do on the free version is network rendering. And what network rendering allows us to do is, if I have two systems both running the studio version of Resolve, I can send a job from one system to the other to be rendered. So when I'm working in Resolve and I hit render, that's, if I'm doing that on the same system I'm working on, that system won't do anything other than render. I can't go back to the color page. I can't go to the edit page and change anything. It's rendering, and that's its sole purpose. So if I want to be able to continue working whilst I render, I can have another system on the network. I can send the job to it, and it'll do the render whilst I carry on working. It's also really handy if I want to deliver ProRes from a Windows system. So ProRes is an Apple codec. It's not supported for rendering. I can open ProRes files on Windows systems, but I can't render to them on Windows systems with Resolve, either in the studio or in the free version. But if I have the studio version and I have a Mac on the network that is running the studio version of Resolve as well, I can then send my job from my Windows system to my Mac system to render it as a ProRes file. So that's where it comes in really handy. You might have, a really beefy workstation, Windows workstation that you work on and do all your grading on, but you need to deliver a ProRes file at the end of it. Your clients ask for a ProRes file, and that's where you will use remote rendering. You'll just send the job off to the Mac on the network. It'll render you a ProRes file. Job done. Again, that's studio only. And the final thing I'm going to talk about is codec support. So very much like when I talked about 10-bit codecs being supported in the studio only version, if we want to render XAVC, then that's a studio only feature. And NVIDIA graphics cards support acceleration of encoding and decoding. So actually rendering and playing back H.264 and H.265 files. So if we want to leverage either of these, if I want to render an XAVC, or I want the accelerated rendering or accelerated playback using my, brand new RTX 3000 series graphics card, if you've been lucky enough to get one, then you'll need the studio version to take advantage of that. Now, that's 13 minutes of PowerPoint. I think that's pretty good. Let's jump into the software, just so I'm not having anyone fall asleep on me. I know PowerPoint can be a bit of a drag when you're working over something like Zoom. So we're actually just going to jump into Resolve now and just have a look at some of the features, some things that are a bit easier to show than network rendering and whatnot. So I've got this project here, this upgrading to Resolve Studio project. And I'll just let it open. And I'm going to jump across to my media page, and we're just going to work through this like you would in any other sort of project, really. We're just going to start on the media page and work our way through. And one of the really nice advancements in DaVinci Resolve, other than going from a solely color grading and color correction application into a fully featured NLE, compositor, DAW, all these sorts of things, one of the really powerful things it's got over the last couple of years is what's called the DaVinci Neural Engine. And this is Resolve's AI, and we can use it to do some really cool things. Now, I have some bins set up here just for the purpose of demonstrating this. So I've got, some clips that were of a band. In fact, let me just jump across yet. No, audio should be fine. I'm just double checking. I don't want to deafen anyone if I play any of these back. So we've got our clips here of a band, just playing. And what we're going to do is, we've been quite lucky. All of these clips have the main actor or character's name in them, so we know the drummer is going to be called Harry. We know Jim is our guitarist, Tom's our bassist. But if we don't have this, if we've not got someone that's gone through meticulously and labeled each one of the clips, and we just want an easy way of sorting them, we can use DaVinci's neural engine to actually identify faces in these clips. So I'll show you what I mean. If I select all of these clips and then just right click on them and come down to analyze clips for people, select that, Resolve will do its thing. It might take, a minute or two up to, a while, depending on how many faces or how many clips you're asking Resolve to search out. But it's done it there. We've only got a few clips, so that's fine. And we can see here is Resolve's identified 5 people. Well, if we go through them, we can see, it's identified person 1. Well, we know this is Tom. Person 2, it's got all the shots with Jim in them, and it's put them all together. Person 3, it's got all of our shots with Harry, the drummer, in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come here, and I'm just going to name them. Name that Tom. Jim was our guitarist. Harry was our drummer. Let me just get that. I know that if I go to person 4, she's called Hannah. So we'll go to select that, into the name, Hannah. And whoever set this up for us hasn't given us a name for this other female character in the background. But I'm just going to call her Presenter for just now. Presenter, there we go. I don't know her name, but it's an easy way of identifying her. Now we have this Other People folder here, and this Other People folder is clips that Resolve's not been able to identify someone in. So we can actually tag these. Well, we know this is Tom, our bassist, so if I right click on it, I can then go tag as Tom. Same again here, tag as Tom. Well, that's Jim. Tag that as Jim. This one's Jim and Hannah, so we can put it wherever we want. I'll put it in Jim again, and I'm going to call this one Presenter. There we go. So now what we've got is Resolve has identified all these faces in our clips, and it's put them all in their own little bins there, and that makes managing them really easy. So if you think about, say you're doing a series of interviews all throughout the day, you don't want to have to go through and log who's in each clip or anything like that. You want a really quick, easy way to go, right, well, I'm cutting together an interview of Tom, so all my Tom clips are in one specific place. That's fine. Well, if I close this window, how do I find that? Because it's not made those bins anywhere here. It's done the analysis, but where do I access this? So if I come up to DaVinci Resolve in the top left here and go to Preferences, you can also get to it if you use Control or Command if you're on a Mac, and then the comma key. But I'm just going to go to Preferences, and here we've got preferences on a system-wide scale and on a user-wide scale. I'm just going to go across to User, and then on the left-hand side here, I have all my different categories of preferences, and you can get really in-depth with it, but I'm looking for one specific thing. I'm going to go down to Editing, and we have this Automatic Smart Bins section here. So Automatic Smart Bins for people metadata. Well, that's what I've just done. I asked Resolve to analyze it for people, and I've categorized all the people in one place. So if I just tick that, hit Save, now down here in the bottom left corner, this people bin has appeared. If I click on that, I get a little arrow that drops down, and here we go. Hannah, Harry, Jim, Presenter, Tom. All my clips are there. They're all really easily sorted, and I've not had to go through each clip, drag it to a different bin, or enter metadata manually, anything like that, because that's the time-consuming stuff that is just, it's just dull. Nobody enjoys doing it. but it's got to be done on these larger shoots. So Resolve's neural engine takes that away. It analyzes for people, and that's a studio only feature. Pretty much everything I'm showing is obviously studio only features, but it's seeing these tools in action to know whether or not they would actually benefit your workflow. Another studio feature that we have in the media page, at least, if I come up to my additional content bin here, what I have is this, and I don't know how this translates across Zoom, so I'll full screen it, and I don't know if you'll be able to see the combing effect that I have going on here. And basically I have an interlaced file it needs deinterlacing because I'm getting this horrible combing effect where the two fields have split as we've basically just put them together. Well, Resolve's got a really powerful and really good deinterlacing algorithm built into it. So if I play through that, you can see pretty much the fields are present everywhere. So if I just come down here to the bottom left corner into my project settings, under my master settings, I have this enable video field processing option. And that's telling Resolve to treat the clip as though it's interlaced. Well, I don't want that. I don't want to process each individual field. I want to deinterlace it and treat it as progressive. So I'm turning that off. And then if I save my settings, you'll see actually that combing's pretty much gone. The problem is it's very blurry. It's not all that sharp. And as I play back, you can still see there's some fields in there, and it's not great. So if I right click on my clip and go to clip attributes, under the video tab here, I have this enable deinterlacing box just there. And all I have to do is click on that, hit OK, and you'll see instantly what we're working with is a lot sharper there. And it's done a really good job of deinterlacing that. Now the clip itself is very short. So if I hit play, it's a second long maybe. But it's just to show you how powerful that deinterlace tool is. So I'm just using the scroll wheel here just to zoom in and out. And then if I click down on the scroll wheel, or middle mouse button as it's known, I can actually click down on that and drag my image around. But if you look at the top of this apron here, I'll go back and I'll turn deinterlacing off again, just so you can see the change that you get. See how much softer that is, where it just tries to blend the two frames together rather than do a proper deinterlacing. So I'll turn that back on, and straight away you see you get a much sharper image there. So we've looked at studio features in the media page. Again, the media page isn't the most glamorous, talking about organizing bins and shot logging, entering metadata, deinterlacing. It's not the exciting stuff that we all get into, post-production for. So we'll jump across to our edit page now, and we'll just take a look at some of the features that are studio only in the edit page. Now let's come along here to this clip. What I want to show you is over here in my inspector, just in the right hand side here, we have this lens correction option. Now, if you're anything like me, you spend a lot of time on eBay or marketplaces looking for vintage lenses and adapters to try and put vintage lenses on my brand new camera and all these sorts of things. And because there is such a sort of wide variety of lenses available and adapters available now, it's very possible we can start getting distortion, especially if we're using really, really wide angle lenses. So if I take this clip here as an example, it's not massively noticeable, but there is a little bit of distortion around the edge here, or I can just sort of see it down there. And we have this lens correction tool, and all I have to do to correct that is hit Analyze, and Resolve analyzes it. And if I mark this clip and then just play this clip back, you can see it's now straightened all those lines out for us. Although when you get to the end, it's probably going into being warped a little bit again there. But it's tried to correct the center of the frame for us. And again, It's a studio only feature, and that's really automatic. It's a couple of seconds. If I want, I can go back in and I can start to tweak that manually if I want. You know, I can blow it out the other way, or I can just reduce the sort of strength of the effect just to try and straighten out that distortion that we were seeing. That's probably a bit closer. And as you've seen there, I used automatic, but I did it manual as well. I did it manually as well. So if I come, say, to this clip, there's no distortion on this clip. I don't need to analyze, I don't need to correct anything, but I can use it in an artistic way. So rather than analyze it, because there is no distortion, what's Resolve going to analyze? What I'm actually going to do is just manually correct this. I'm going to take this distortion slider. I can either click on the slider itself, or I can click in the text box, and you'll see I get a little, my pointer changes to an arrow, my cursor changes to an arrow as I do that. So if I just click and drag that to the left, so it actually looks as though the car is pushing out of the frame towards us, and just go, whoops, just go to the beginning of this clip. We now are actually using that distortion in a creative way. We're using it to make it look as though the car is pushing out of the frame coming at us. And again, really simple, really easy to use, especially, you know, if you're using action cams or things like that. You know, if you've got GoPro footage or something from the Insta360 camera, you know, the little action camera, you might tend to find there's a little bit of sort of wide angle distortion on that. Well, if you're using the free version of Resolve, there's nothing really you can do about that. You might have a plugin that you can use, or you might have some sort of manufacturer specific software, but a lot of times you don't want to be jumping between applications, rendering out another file, replacing it in your edit. It all gets a bit complex. So just being able to do it all in the studio version of Resolve is really, really nice. The other thing I was going to show in this inspector here is this retiming and scaling option here. So if I just click on that to open my retiming and scaling controls, what I've got under this line clip here, I have a clip that's been slowed down, and I don't know about you guys. Let me mark that, and then I'll go full screen with this. Now, it's really quite stuttery. I'm hoping that's coming across in Zoom, but it's really stuttery. It's been slowed down, and it's not smooth slow motion. It's obviously not being shot at a very high frame rate, and they've tried to stretch it out after the fact. And what Resolve's having to do at that point is, because it's been shot at a low frame rate, it's having to try and guess what frame's going to come next, because that information isn't there. So I've gone into my retiming and scaling settings here, and you can see it's using the project settings. Well, I can see those if I, again, open my project settings. Under the master settings, if I scroll down, I've got them down here. They're on nearest, standard, faster, and medium. We don't need to know what they do in there. I'm not going to show you what they do in there, because that's on a global aspect. So that's how Resolve treats all clips right now that are having frame interpolation done to them. But down here, I can change it on a clip-by-clip basis. So if I select this clip, we have our retime processes here. So nearest is the easiest one to use. And what nearest does, if I click on that, I'm actually going to go through these frames. Nearest just duplicates the frame. So if you'll see, I'll tap forward once, nothing changes in the frame. Tap forward again, we get a movement frame. Tap forward again, nothing happens. Tap forward again, we get movement. And that's because every other frame, Resolve's just duplicating the frame that came before it. So it's just trying to fill that gap as quickly and easily as it can. And that's fine, because it plays back smoothly. Well, I say it plays back smoothly. It plays back, but it's still a bit jumpy, because we have that part where it just duplicates a frame. So we don't want that. We want the best possible option. Well, what's better than nearest? Well, we have this frame blend option. What does frame blend do? Frame blend, if we play through it, just takes two frames and blends them together in the middle to make that third frame. Now, if I zoom in a little bit, let me come back, oh, not that far, come back to about here. This is really sort of noticeable. If I just sort of jump back here, it's really noticeable on this little light or sign or whatever it is on the ground. And as I move through frame by frame, you can see here, this is where it's been captured in frame. If I go to the next frame, it's in two places because Resolve's trying to blend two frames together to get where it sits. So you end up with these sort of odd artifacts where something's there, it's split across two places, it's there, split across two places, so on and so forth. But again, it's still smoother motion than our nearest option because it's trying to put that information in between. Well, okay, that's fine. You know, again, a little bit more processor intensive, that's fine, but I want the best possible quality. Well, this is where we have this optical flow option. And instead of just taking two frames and blending them together, what optical flow does is Resolve now is analyzing each of the frames and trying to actually recreate where it thinks things are going to be in the next frame. And there's different things we can do with that. So right now, Resolve's just analyzing it and trying to find out where it goes next. If I hit play, a bit smoother still, great. I can come down to this motion estimation drop down here, and you see we've got different options. So standard, better, faster, enhanced, faster and better, and then speed warp. And these are all how we're telling Resolve to put together these clips, or put together these frames that it's constructing. Speed warp is the studio feature. Everything else that with retiming scaling is in the free version, but this speed warp feature is a studio feature, and it will give us the smoothest motion. But if I hit play now, nothing happens because speed warp is so system intensive. Unless you've got a really powerful system, it takes a bit to get going. And you can see there, my system's, I'm not running on a sluggish system, but it's trying to get there, and it's not doing the best job. So what I can do is I could cache this to try and view it back real time. But luckily, what we've already got is we've got a timeline here where we've done some renders. We've put a little grade on. We've done some renders of each of the different options: nearest, frame blending, optical flow, and speed warp. So to remind us, nearest, where it duplicates every frame, I hit play. It's really quite, in fact, go full screen. It's really quite stuttery as it moves along. Well, the next option was, I believe, our frame blending. So I'll come back to this. A little bit smoother, still not the best. We then have our optical flow, which is much smoother than either of the previous two options, but still not as good as it could be. And then we have this speed warp render. And the speed warp render is the smoothest of all of them. You can't tell that Resolve's making up 50% of the frames in there at all. It's all continuous and smooth motion. So if you're working, if you want to start doing some really smooth slow-mo stuff, but your camera only shoots 60 frames a second and you can't afford, however many tens of thousands it is for the latest high-speed Phantom camera to shoot 10,000 frames a second, if you have the studio version of Resolve, you can do the optical flow processing, set it to speed warp, and get that really smooth slow motion. Now, I'm going to jump back across to my edit timeline. We've sort of covered the studio features in the inspector there. And I'm going to take a look, if I come over here to my effects library, I'm going to take a look at some of the filters that are in here. Filters, open effects plugins, whatever you want to call them. They're basically just tools that we use either to fix issues or to add something a little bit creative to our image. So what have we got? We have, let me find the clip. Here we go. I've got this clip here, this yellow clip. It's been shot in a log color space. So it's got a log curve applied. And what that means is it's given us this sort of flat image. There's not a lot of contrast. There's not a lot of saturation. And I want to make this pop. I want to make this stand out. And I don't want to have to go to the color grade, the color page, because, in this scenario, I'm just an editor. I'm not worrying about the color page. I don't want to think about that. I have a colorist that I'll hand that off to, but I still want to be a bit creative and do something. Or maybe I just don't have time for a color grade. I just want to do something quick, easy on the edit page, render it out. It's going to my YouTube channel. It's not going for theatrical delivery. It doesn't have to have tons of tracking or anything like that done. So what can I do? Well, over here in our effects library, under Open Effects Filters, I have all these different resolve effects, and some of these are available in the free version of Resolve, but some of them are studio only. And when you apply them, you can see, if I'm in the free version and I apply some of these plugins, I'll be able to see the effect, but I'll get a big watermark over the top of it that says DaVinci Resolve Studio, and I don't want that. So what am I doing to this clip? I want to do something a bit more creative. So I'm going to take this dehaze plugin, which is studio only. I'm going to apply it, and instantly you can see the change that it's made. What I'll do is in my inspector, in the effects tab here, I can turn. You see, I've got all the settings for my dehaze filter that I've just put on. I can turn that on or off, and you can see the change that it's made instantly. Now I can get in here and be a little bit creative. If, say, the grille on the front of this car, with that contrast, it's kind of difficult to see. I could pull it down if I really want to sort of crush the blacks there. But if I want to keep that visible, might lift that up a little bit. I may change the highlights as well. I can either push the highlights up so that they get sort of close to clipping, or I can bring them down and make them flat again. But I'll push it up a little bit there. And there you go. We've got a little bit more of a creative look on the edit page really quickly just by applying this dehaze filter. I'll do another one, just an example. I'll apply this contrast pop. I drag and drop that on. We now have, you'll see again here, it's added this contrast pop option here. Now, by default, it's not actually doing anything, but as soon as I start to make changes, I can get some really sort of creative looks. Again, I could pull all the contrast out and make it look sort of muddy and blurry and flat, or I can push it up and start getting into some really high contrast, almost sort of comic book art styles of contrast here. Again, I've got tons of control over this. I'm not showing you how to make really fancy effects or anything. I'm just showing you the sort of tools that you have in the studio version. So again, I'll enable and disable that. And if I disable both of them, you'll see how I've gone from a really, really flat log image there with dehaze applied, brightened up a bit, and with contrast pop, we've got something there as well. So again, really quick way to just start making creative looks in the edit page without having to do anything super special. I'm going to come along to the end of the timeline here and just show you the last sort of bit in the edit page that I can. And on this sort of closing shot that we have here, if I just hit play, you'll see we've actually got a lens flare coming off this light. Well, the other light next to it's not exactly in a completely different place. I might want to try and replicate that in the same way. And I'm going to scroll down, again, another filter. I'm just going to scroll down and look for my lens flare filter. And I'm just going to drag and drop that on top of that clip at the end there. Again, the lens flare filter is a studio only feature. If I want to use that in the free version, I will just get a watermark over the footage. And just to get a bit creative, I'm going to change the position of it. I'm actually coming into my inspector, going to the position drop down, and just changing the X and Y so that it sits on top of that light in the corner. Now, unless we've somehow managed to get like a small portable sun into that aircraft hangar, it's not going to blow out that much. So I can come up here to my global corrections. I can pull the scaling on everything down a little bit, but the flare spot itself is still pretty big. So if I come down further in the inspector to this elements tab, we actually have everything in this plugin broken out into separate things. So we have the full screen glare, we have the flare spot, starburst, and I can go in and adjust all of those elements individually. So I'm just going to do the flare spot for just now. I'm just going to pull that down, the center of that. You can see I can pull that up, pull that down. I'm going to pull that down quite a bit, and then I'll probably do the same with everything overall, just to try and match the bit next to it. There we go. We've got a sort of rough looking idea. But as I've scaled it down, We can see it's slightly off center. Come back to my positioning. So move across there, down a little bit, and just try and line it up with a light. Now, that's great. You know, we've replicated the sort of creative shot we're looking for. But the problem is, if I hit play, you can see there's a slight camera movement. And by the end here, the lens flare that I'd placed over the top of that light is actually off it. So normally you can track things if you want, but we don't have tracking in the edit page. So what we're going to do is we're just going to keyframe it, because all of the parameters for my plugins are keyframeable. So I'll zoom in again. It's sort of positioned in the right place. And just over here, next to the position parameter, I have this small diamond icon. And if I click that, it'll go orange. And when it's orange, what that indicates is my auto keyframes are turned on. So now all I have to do is move along to where it's off the light and then just reposition it again. So probably don't need to adjust the X value. So I'll Control Z, undo that. Just adjust the Y value, bring it back down over the top. And now as I sort of scroll through, you can see it tracks to it roughly. Again, this is sort of a quick way to do it. And it works. It works in the edit page for doing little things like this on sort of, you know, B-roll shots or something like that. You know, it's a really quick, easy way to do these things. But if I want to get more involved, then I can do. You know, if I want to do proper tracking of an effect, then that's where I'll jump across to the color page and do that. Now, things like lens flares, for example, they're available in, you know, the edit page and the color page in Resolve. It's not like they're only available on one or the other. Most of the filters are available across both pages. Maybe one or two that aren't, but things like lens flares are. And I'm going to select a different clip. I'm going to select this clip 10, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put a lens flare on this headlight here. So I'll scroll down up here in my Open Effects library. I can open and close that. I'm going to scroll down, find my lens flare just here. I'm just going to drag and drop that onto my node in the color page. One of the big advantages of doing this in the color page is I now have on-screen controls. So I can actually click on the viewer and then position the lens flare itself that way. I can also size it in here as well. Now, I'm not a fan of the starburst type lens flare on this. What I'm actually going to do is in the settings, I'm going to set that to be modern sci-fi. Just a bit more pleasing to sort of go with a sleek modern aesthetic of this car. And I'll just size that. Again, I've got all the different elements here. So the flare spot, if I want, I can pull that down so it's not super bright. I can go in, I've got, you know, all these different global brightness settings. I can bring that up, down. Global saturation, you know, if I want that purple to be really strong, or lots of control, like we'd expect in Resolve. But again, the same problem of if I hit play, it's not tracking. Well, if I come down to my tracking window here, in fact, I'll just zoom in a little bit. If I hover over it, it says tracking or tracker there. If I click on that, we have different types of trackers. We have our window tracker, where normally we would draw a mask on the screen and then, you know, say we're tracking someone's face, I'll draw a mask on their face and track it to that so that as they move through the scene, it sticks on their face. Well, we're not using a window here, we're using Open Effects, we're using a filter. So all I have to do is come over to this drop down here, or I can use the 3 buttons above the tracker itself. But I'm going to go across this drop down where it says window and select FX. And all I have to do now is add a point for Resolve to track. So in the bottom left corner of this tracking window, I have this add tracker point button here. Again, I'll try and zoom in so you can see it, just down here. And all I have to do is click that, and you'll see I now have this blue crosshair, and as I click on it, it goes red, where I can position Resolve and tell it, I want you to track this point of the clip. So I'm just going to place that just place it in a bit of high contrast right there where the sort of black and white points of that headlight meet. Zoom out, and then all I have to do is hit track forward in the tracker palette, and you'll see now, if I play again, in fact, I'll turn off my overlay, you'll see now my lens flare is tracked to that specific point of the image. And it's that simple. Again, FX tracking is in the free version of Resolve Studio, but the lens flare plugin isn't. So this is just to try and give you an idea of what you can achieve with some of these plugins that you might not already have access to. The final thing I'm going to show you on this Aston Martin timeline relay, I think. In fact, no, it's probably not the last thing, but I will try and speed this up because I know I'm being quite verbose as I do this. I'll go back to my edit page because we did stuff to this clip and I'm not too happy with it. I'm just going to delete that so we don't have anything on this Concorde clip anymore. Oh wait, no, I'm not getting anything on this Concorde clip. That's fine. So I'm going to jump across to our color page, and the big problem I've got here, and we're not going to see this in clips where we've shot outdoor and there's a ton of natural light, but the shots like this where it's indoor, if I control F, well, there we go, full screen. I want you to sort of have a look here. Now this might be, this might not show up for you at all because we're compressing it and sending it over Zoom, but up here in these darker parts of the image, we've got quite a lot of noise. In fact, I'll come out of that. I'll go to my enhanced viewer and I'll just scroll, just zoom in a bit here into this darker part of the image. And now if I hit play, you should be able to see all of that noise moving in the dark areas here. And this is probably one of the biggest features that I get asked about the studio version of Resolve is the noise reduction. Is it good? Does it work? Like, is it worth it? And yeah is always the answer. I will always say yeah, because I think it's phenomenal. There's two different types of noise reduction in the color page in Resolve. We have temporal noise reduction and spatial noise reduction. Temporal noise reduction gives Resolve or tells Resolve to analyze frames either side of the current frame to see how the noise moves and then try and eliminate it as a whole. And then spatial noise reduction actually tries to remove noise in the frame itself. So rather than processing multiple frames, it's processing all the pixels around the noise and trying to blend them. So if I zoom in a little bit again so you can see what I'm doing, and I come down to my motion effects palette, which is this icon here, I have my temporal noise reduction and my spatial noise reduction. And under spatial noise reduction, if I start upping that, you'll see this is the one where it tries to blend the pixels around it. If I go too far, it really starts to soften that, these sort of girders in the back wall of this hanger here. You see how it softens that out because it's just trying to smudge the pixels together. And that's not what I want. There are different settings. Again, we're on faster. I can go to better where it actually keeps a lot of that detail. And you can go to enhanced. Again, this is all the level of processing depends on, or the level of processing you can do in real time depends on how powerful your system is. But what I'm going to have a look at here is this temporal noise reduction. I like this because I know it works really well and it keeps a lot of detail. So I'm going to tell Resolve to analyze 3 frames either side of the current frame that I'm on. I want it to do, well, better. I want it to do the best it can. And I'm just going to drag up the thresholds here. So the luma and chroma, and you'll see as soon as I do that, the noise starts to disappear just in the background there. And you can also see it reflected in the waveform, this parades down here. As I drag that up, you can see how that just cleans up a little bit. We get rid of the noise. And then if I just go back to my enhanced viewer again, hit play, there's none of that moving noise that we were seeing before. If I disable that node, that's not the node that I was trying to do. There we go. If I disable that node, you can see we're back to having all that noise in the background. Enable it, all that noise is gone. So the noise reduction in Resolve Studio feature, absolutely fantastic for what it does. And I'd recommend it pretty strongly to anyone. Now, the last thing on this timeline I'm going to show you, again, I hope I'm not going on too long, so I'll try and get through this maybe a little bit quicker. is this down here. So you know what? Someone's already graded that, so I'll get rid of that grade. And one of the advanced filters or plugins, OpenFX plugins that we use in Resolve is called our patch replace. So if I look at this, the front of this car here, there's a small badge down here that I want to get rid of. As I play through that, I just want rid of that. I just want that to be really sleek, white. That's all I want it to be. So I'm going to search in my OpenFX library. I'm just going to come down to patch replacer. This is the tool that we're looking for. Drag that on, and you'll see I now have these two ellipses that have turned up. And what it's doing, as you can probably tell, is it's copying from this ellipses here down to this one. And I can change their shape and their size. So you know what? I'll just position that over there, and I'll actually drag the other one just above it there. If I turn that off now, you'll see it's pretty much got rid of it. There's a little bit of the badge that's still there at the top, so I'll turn my OpenFX overlays back on, maybe reposition that, maybe adjust that slightly. I think that's good. I'd say that's good. So just like we did with the lens flare, we're just going to track this now, because if I move one frame either side, or if I move all the frames, apparently, it doesn't track with it. So I'll just line that up again. There we go, roughly. Come back down to our tracker window, make sure I'm on effects, add a tracking point, place my tracking point over a high contrast area, and then again, track forward. If I zoom out, I've tracked forward, I can track backwards as well. Turn off my overlays. Again, I'm doing that in the window here. If I come down to the bottom left corner of my viewer, I've got a little drop down menu. I can turn overlays off. And now if I go into my enhanced viewer again, hit play, you can see that badge is just gone from the side of the car. Really simple, really easy to use. Now, that's fine on things like the car where the body of the car doesn't flex. It doesn't change, it doesn't morph, anything like that. And it's not going over anything difficult. If I jump across quickly to our additional effects timeline here, what I've got here, let me just delete that. What I've got here is a nice shot of the countryside where a plane flies in. Now, if I was to tell you I'm just going to remove that plane and it's going to look like it was never there, you'd probably think I'm going to spend hours drawing a mask around it and doing loads of little fine things, or you might just think I'm crazy. But with DaVinci Resolve's neural engine, it's really simple to do this. So unlike our patch replacer, I'm not going to take a different part like the sky and then try and copy it over the plane, because it moves across the mountains, and that doesn't help me. Why would there just be a patch of sky over this, like in the center of this green mountain? Well, luckily, someone's done a bit of the hard work for me. Someone's actually put a window around the plane and they've tracked it. So that's the main bit of the grunt work done. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to add another node here, just to add another serial node. And I did that using Alt-S, but you can do it if you right-click, add node, corrector. You can do it that way if you want. But I'm just adding another node, and you can see the RGB data goes into the green input, comes out the green output of that node, and then all the way through. We also have these blue connectors along the bottom, and these are our alpha outputs. So these are effectively our sort of masking and transparency outputs. So all I have to do is drag from the blue output of the first node to the blue input of the second node. And you'll see now, again, if I highlight this node, this is the area that I'm working in. And in terms of OpenFX, what I'm going to look for is my object removal tool. So just here, I've just searched the word object, and it's found my object removal filter. So it's not done anything because we've not told it to do anything yet. So what I'm going to do, I now have the settings for it up here. I'm just going to hit scene analysis. Resolve's just playing through the clip right now, trying to analyze, the whole clip. We've masked off that area, so this gray patch now, as we see it, is the part that we've masked off. Resolve knows it's got to try and get rid of this grey part. It can get rid of the blue in the sky really easily, but this grey part, not so much. As it flies over the mountains, it's having a little bit of a trickier time as it does that. So if I hit build clean plate, that's Resolve. It's me telling Resolve, right, you know where it is, try and remove it. So I've hit build clean plate, and it's done a pretty good job. If I play through, can't see it. There's a little bit there right at the end. You can see a little bit just over these mountains here, just as Resolve isn't quite sure exactly what it's meant to be doing. And, that's fine. It's done a really good job for a first time. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to up this analysis boundary option. So right now, Resolve is sort of searching 40 pixels around the mask and trying to find out exactly where to draw information from. So if I want to tell Resolve, actually search a bit of a larger area, put that up to say 70, I'll hit scene analysis again, just let Resolve go through, analyze it all. It knows what it's looking for now. We'll get through this. As always, it takes a little bit of time. That little bit's still there. Just hit build clean plate this time. And it's actually done a worse job. It's done a worse job for me there. It's searching a larger area and it's done a worse job. But that's fine because I've upped the analysis area. I've not actually changed the area that it's affecting. So under the render settings here, if I up the search range in the render settings, say again, I'll just put this up to 54. Why not? Just pick a value. Hit build clean plate again. And because it's searching a larger area, it's analyzing a larger area to begin with, and then when I'm rendering it, I'm telling it to do the same. If I hit playback now, there's absolutely no indication that that plane was ever in that scene. So that's how simple object removal can be in Resolve. It's really, really quick, really easy, and really powerful. If, again, as a studio-only feature, these are the sorts of things where you go, do I need it? Do I not? Can I just mask it out manually? Do you want to spend the time masking things out manually? Or actually would having a license and being able to do it in a couple of minutes rather than rotoscoping and do all this sort of stuff save you so much time that you could be getting on with doing other stuff, getting more work, doing more creative things? Again, probably the last, I'll try and sort of burn through these last two because I know we're getting close to an hour and I still want to have a Q&A at the end. So the second to last thing I'm probably going to show you here is the face refinement tool. And this made a bit of a splash when it first came out. So traditionally, if I'm doing beauty work, if I'm grading something for a makeup company, I would have to sort of draw a manual mask around the eyes, around the nose, the mouth, all those sorts of things, manually draw the masks and track them all individually so that I can adjust those areas very specifically. And that, again, is time consuming, and it's stuff that we don't want to spend our time doing. So if I come back again over to our OpenEffects filters, I'll just type in face. We have this face refinement OFX plugin. If I just drag and drop that on, like we did with our object removal, we've got to tell Resolve to analyze the clip first. So I'll hit analyze. Resolve will just play through the clip. And what it's doing right now is it's using the neural engine, that AI, to try and recognize a face and recognize the components of that face. So as it's analyzed and stopped now, you'll see Resolve's actually just drawing a mask. What I'll do is I'll hide the clips and I'll go into my expanded viewer, and you can see it's already drawn around the eyes. It's got the eyebrows, the nose, the mouth. It's done all that for us, and it's tracked it. So as she moves, the masks move. Well, that's a large part of my previous job done. I don't have to draw the masks. I don't have to track it all manually. The second part is I already have controls now to adjust all this sort of stuff. So I'll turn off that overlay just so we're not staring at a weird sort of man in the iron mask type overlay. And say we're doing this for a beauty company, for example. Well, we know that if you watch a makeup advert, there tends to be a lot of skin smoothing in there. So if I bring up this bit here, this operating mode where it's trying to automatically, this beauty automatic mode as it's called, and just tweak those settings a little bit. And now if I just enable and disable that node, you can see already how much smoother it's made her skin. And that's great as an overall, but the whole thing that I was talking about was having to do each part of the face individually. Well, we know Resolve's done this, so eye retouching, I can sharpen just the eye. I can brighten just the whites of her eyes if I want. I can actually do some eye bag removal in there, so I'll bring that up a little bit. Maybe add a little bit more light around her eyes there. What about her lips? Well, sort of a nice natural or a more natural color, maybe just a little bit more pink, a little bit more saturation, and then I'll just enable and disable that node. And you can see just quickly how we've gone from the original shot with the face refinement tool into a much more smoothed out and refined image that you would expect to see of a makeup advert or something along those lines. So that's the face refinement tool. Again, really quick, really easy to use. It's a lifesaver if you're doing any sort of talking head stuff, if you're shooting documentaries and you've just got a talking head shot and you just want a really quick way to track everything and make some quick, really simple adjustments. The face refinement tool is a really great way to do that. The last thing I'm going to show is for those that know a bit of the history about Resolve. When Blackmagic bought DaVinci Resolve, there was two applications. There was DaVinci Resolve and DaVinci Revival. DaVinci Resolve was the color grading application. DaVinci Revival was the film scanning and restoration software. So what we've got here is a 16mm film scan. And after DaVinci Revival was stopped being developed, they took a lot of the tools in there and brought them into DaVinci Resolve. As if I clear my my filters search here and scroll down, DaVinci Revival filters. So we have things like automatic dirt removal, chromatic aberration removal, dead pixel fixers, dust busters, noise reduction, and that's where our object removal and our patch replacers now live. So we have all these really powerful tools for restoring film in here as well. So if I just quickly play this, you'll see we've got a lot of film damage. There's scratches, there's dust, there's dirt, there's all these sorts of things. Well, right here, I have, in fact, let me just, I will hide my open effects list so you can just see the nodes here. And all I'm going to do is turn all those nodes on, and you can see this is the final image of what we're working with. And that, compared to the original, where there's dust, dirt, scratches, all these sorts of things, is a massive improvement. Well, quickly, how did we get there? Well, the first node I have in here is this dirt removal tool. And if I just enable that, you can see as I enable and disable that, in fact, I'll go to this viewer again, I was pressing the wrong button there. Silly me. So as I enable and disable that specific node, you can see all this sort of dirt and dust, how it just gets so quickly removed, or at least reduced significantly. Again, if I come along, I've got a little marker here to help me with this. If I come along, there's a big patch of sort of like a scratch or some dust over her forehead on this frame when it's been scanned. Well, again, I can turn on my dustbuster tool or my dustbuster node, and you can see how quickly that's removed. It's like it was never there. Again, if I scroll through this clip a little bit, there's this vertical line here, which you can see is a scratch on the film or something like that. And again, all we've done, if I select the next node along, which is this patch replace node, one of the ones we used earlier to get rid of the badge on the car, if I turn that on or off, all we've actually done, I'll come down here, show my open effects overlay, all we've actually done is we've copied, a strip from a clean strip of the background over to this vertical line here. And then if I enable that, you can see how it just disappears. Again, I'll turn that off and just enable and disable it there. So again, as you can see, I've got 3 nodes here. I've not done a lot of work to it, but you can already see how much that's cleaned up of that film scan. So if you're doing film scanning, even if it's 16 mil, 35 mil, if you've got a scanner and you've managed to scan some 8 mil, high 8 type stuff and it's scratched, or anything, any sort of film work, Resolve Studio has the tools to deal with that. Now, like I said, I don't want to go on too much. There's a few other things I could show you, but I know we're over an hour now, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to sit through listening to me ramble about Resolve. There's only two things left that I really want to mention before I open this up to be a Q&A. And these are the two sort of selling points to me for Resolve Studio, that they're not in any sort of polished corporate PowerPoint or anything like that. The first one is the fact that if you buy a DaVinci Resolve license, you get every update for it ever has been free. So the first Blackmagic version of DaVinci Resolve that they released was version 7 or 8, I believe. And if you bought a DaVinci Resolve 7 license, you can download DaVinci Resolve 17, which has just come out, and just continue working like it's nothing. You don't have to pay an upgrade fee for it. You don't have to buy a new license. Your old license still works. I've got some licenses. I've got a license here, for example. This is the activation code license, and you can see I got it for DaVinci Resolve 16. But that license, if I use that activation code license with Resolve 17, which is what I'm doing at the moment, as you can see here, it's the studio version of Resolve. The license still works. I'm not having to pay upgrade fees every year, or no monthly subscription or anything like that. Once I own the software, I own the software. Now, Blackmagic are, they're free to change that whenever. They might charge for version 18, but I highly doubt they're ever going to. It's not something that they've ever talked about. It's always been a free license or a free upgrade, and it's always been phenomenal. The other thing is, depending on what you're doing, so for example, I have a pocket camera 6K here that I bought a while back, and you get a free license with it. So if you're buying a Blackmagic camera, you already get the license with it, which is great. But at the moment, what Blackmagic are doing is a really good promotion, and I've got one of them here, and it's the speed editor. So this speed editor you can use in the cut page, basically as an edit controller. So I can use, hold this up, I can use the jog wheel here to scrub through my timeline. I can shuttle through the timeline, and I've got editing controls as well. So I can actually just trim all from this control panel. And this control panel on its own is the same cost as a DaVinci Resolve license. But the promotion that Blackmagic are doing at the moment, if you buy a DaVinci Resolve license, which I think it's maybe £280 or something along those lines, if you buy a DaVinci Resolve license, you get the speed editor for free. So really, you're getting a hardware controller that you can use to speed up your edits for free with the license. Or, depending on how you look at it, if you buy the license, you're getting the speed editor and the license for free because they're the same price. But if you buy one of the DaVinci Resolve licenses at the moment, whether it's the dongle or the activation code, you will get the speed editor for free with it. And I think that is brilliant. You can take the speed editor, it works over Bluetooth and USB-C. So if you're out on the road, you've got a laptop, you can use it there. You can bring it back to your office, plug it in, and carry on editing really quickly. And I think that's a massive selling point to me. But yeah, I hope that's given you a bit of an overview of sort of the features of the studio version of Resolve. The free version of Resolve isn't bad or limited really in any way. I've done a lot of work with Resolve, and I always tell people that 95% of the features in the studio version are in the free version. It's things like, the noise reduction, the facial analysis, these sorts of really high-end features that you have to pay your one-off license fee for. But yeah, I hope that's given you just a bit of an insight into why you might want to consider upgrading. So I'm just going to go across to the chat just now, and just see if there's any questions. If you've got any questions that you want to throw in, whilst I'm sort of looking through them, feel free to, and I'll try and answer them as best as I can. So someone's asked, I do have the studio version of 17. I'm looking to find the embedded shot date in DaVinci metadata. There does not appear to be an embedded shot date, only a manual field entry. Is this feature yet to be added? Apparently this was mentioned in 16. Have I missed something? Let me have a look. So in the media pool, if I come across here in the media page and go to all groups, we have all of our shot, or we have all of our metadata in here. So it was the shot date. It's not a metadata field that I'm particularly familiar with. Again, as you can see as I scroll through this, there is a ton of metadata that you can add. You can add in, focal point, ND filters that you've used, all these sorts of things. So it's very possible that there's metadata in there you might not be aware of at the time, or is it the shot day that we're thinking of? So let me have a look. It might be this shoot day. I'm not sure. The shot type. There's shot. So I'm not sure if there's a field missing or anything like that. But the thing that I would say is if there's a feature that's not showing up or something's not working correctly, Blackmagic have a really good support department. They're really responsive. You can pick up the phone to them, you can email them, and if you email them and ask them about that, if there's something that you're not quite clear on, or if there's a specific metadata field, that you might want to know a bit more about, things like that, just contact the support guys at Blackmagic. Their email address, do you know what? I know their email address off by heart, as I actually used to work in the support department for Blackmagic. So it's support-emea@blackmagicdesign.com. And I've just put that in the chat, or I've just put that to the individual that's asked the question. I'll copy that again and just send that to everyone, just so everyone's got a copy, just in case, we can answer sort of pre-sales questions. I'm always happy to talk you through these things, but if there's a technical issue or something's not working as you expect, always contact the guys at Blackmagic first. Like I said, they're really good, really helpful in that respect. So, I've not seen any more questions pop through, which either means you're all sick of listening to me, or I've answered hopefully a lot of your questions. If there is anything that comes up, I will also put our email address in here, which is scanprovideo@scan.co.uk. And if any questions, resolve wise, if you're looking at, or if you're thinking of buying a license, you don't know whether to get the dongle or the activation code, or you want to buy a camera, anything like that, even questions about it, any of that comes up, feel free to drop us an email, and we will be more than happy to help you with anything that comes up.
For more information on any of the products and solutions mentioned in this webinar, contact the Pro Video team today. And you can also shop our Blackmagic design range at Scan Pro Video. If you haven't checked out our other sessions yet, then head over to the Pro Video YouTube channel and search Blackmagic Design Webinars. Thanks for watching.